Okay, this is Glinda again. I'm very pleased to welcome tonight Kasha Helget. She's an Arlington Regional Master Naturalist, and she's going to talk to us about ticks and mosquitoes. And I think we're all in line to learn a whole lot because I know lately, seems like every other day I get a flyer in my mailbox about some pest control company that wants to come and spray my yard, and I'm not inclined to do that. So I think that Kasha can help educate all of us. And so now I will turn it over to her to give her presentation.
Okay, hi everybody. Sorry for the glitch. That was my fault, and unfortunately, things are going to be changed a little bit because normally I show you some things that I have in my house as little demonstration stuff. I'm just going to have to tell you about them, but it's probably also going to move this presentation along a little bit faster. Deborah, are you going to be advancing the slides?
I am. It's in a PDF format, so I'm going to have to go slide by slide, but that'll be just fine.
Yeah.
Can everyone
Okay. So if you could go to
see it, okay.
Okay. So if you could go to the second one.
And again, I just want to make sure everyone can see.
Okay. Is the Arlington Regional Master Naturalist slide up right now?
Yes. And again,
I can see it. They are showing.
Thank you, Carolyn.
You're welcome.
Okay, great. I'll just tell you when to advance them. There are two groups that do this presentation. ARMAN, the Arlington Regional Master Naturalist, and the Master Gardeners. And I'm going to tell you just really briefly about each of us if you don't already know. Master Naturalists are generally concerned with your whole environment where you live. Native plants, native critters, geology, how everything fits together and how people can work in their environment in the most healthy way. We do citizen science projects, we do education events like this one. A lot of what people see from us is working in the field, doing leading invasive plant removals. We also work with the Master Gardeners. Next slide, please. The Master Gardeners are concerned with plants in general, where Master Naturalists look at native plants, Master Gardeners look at plants, plant health, and everything from your tomatoes to native plants. They run a help desk. The website is on this page. They run plant clinics at various events, classes like this, and they also work in demonstration gardens, and we work with them as well. Next slide. So you want to learn about mosquitoes? I certainly hope so. Otherwise, you're in the wrong place. Next slide. Why is this important? We want to respect the niche of all living organisms, and that is mosquitoes are important in the world. They're important for a lot of reasons, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. But I think you know they're food for a lot of creatures. Dispel the fear of getting Zika or West Nile virus or some other pathogen from a mosquito. Understand the risks and benefits of mosquito control and the dangers of using non-selective pesticides indiscriminately. That's a mouthful. I'm going to break that down and I'm going to repeat it in different ways again and again. Also, avoid a false sense of security if you use pesticides. They ain't all good. We need to protect our native pollinators and beneficial insects, and I'm going to tell you a lot more about how you can do that safely. Learn some personal protection tactics, many of which you probably already know, but there might be some that you'll go, oh, that's interesting, so you can enjoy being outside. Next slide. What good are mosquitoes? Well, they're a whole lot of good. One of the big items that people don't think about is in this little image. They are pollinators too. As a matter of fact, the males are primarily pollinators because when they're not mating, they're probably consuming some pollen and moving from plant to plant. Mosquitoes live 2 to 3 months, so they're going to have an opportunity to bounce around to different plants. They're food. We all know that for so many creatures, birds, bats, fishes, frogs, lizards, spiders. This is all the adult mosquitoes. Underwater and right above water, amphibians like turtles, dragonfly larvae, and other larvae will eat the mosquito eggs and larvae. From a global perspective, the first one's a little interesting, like really? They occupy tropical rainforests, so we don't have to. They're very busy there, so a lot of people don't want to, or other creatures don't want to be in there and make it kind of uninhabitable. One thing that's kind of interesting is they aggravate caribou herds. Who knew? They keep them on the move so they don't stand in crushed plants. And of course, migratory birds are up there, so they're going to eat those mosquitoes as well. Another thing, here's some good cocktail conversation. Mosquito larvae eat algae, parasites, fungi, and other detritus. Very interesting. And larval poop is great for plants. Next slide. Mosquito facts. 3,500 species worldwide. Virginia, there are about 60 different species, but we are going to focus on the 3 that are in the pictures here, because these are the ones that you're primarily going to be encountering in Northern Virginia. They're largely aquatic, and what I mean by that is most of a mosquito's development is near or under stagnant water. Stagnant means still. They need still water for eggs to develop through to adulthood. That's what the moms look for, to lay their eggs in still water. Only adult females bite, humans and other vertebrates. They need the protein for egg production. So males don't bite. If you ever see a mosquito flying around in your car and it's kind of like bouncing off the window, it's probably a male that's not interested in you, just wants to get out. They're cold-blooded, which means they're not generally active below 50 degrees. And I didn't find in the 60s they're not all that active, but it's going to be ramping up really quickly now as the days get warmer. They live 2 to 3 months. I mentioned that before. Hibernating adults can live upwards of 8 months, or in suspended animation, as it were. And usually the females have been bred at that point, so they can pop out and when the weather warms up and get busy to look for a meal. Okay, let's, next slide, please. Let's talk about these individual mosquitoes. The Culex mosquitoes, there are 2 different kinds. They're pretty much indistinguishable. These are the ones we're most familiar with historically. The dusk and dawn biters. They're small and brown, and while they prefer birds, they obviously will bite people too. They're not as aggressive as daytime biters, which means you might come back in with a whole bunch of whelps and you don't even know that one's on you. So all the more reason to wear insect repellent. Again, they like to lay eggs in stagnant water. All mosquitoes like still water, but Culex mosquitoes are not fussy. They will lay it in dirty water, storm drains, clogged gutters, ditches, you name it. They will drop their eggs there, where other mosquitoes I'll tell you about are a little more fussy. And these are the ones that may spread West Nile virus and St. Louis encephalitis. Next slide. The other mosquitoes are cousins. They're the Aedes mosquitoes, Aedes aegypti and Aedes albopictus. They're very similar, and of course they're teeny tiny, so you're probably not going to be able to tell them apart. These are the daytime biters, and I'll give you more information about that in the next slide. The aegypti likes people more than anything, so they're the ones that are going to be more aggressive to people, where albopictus will bite animals or people. They're not all that fussy, so they're probably not going to spread as much disease as the aegypti mosquito. But I'm going to say something, and I'm going to say it again, and I'm going to say it again. Not every bite means that there's going to be a disease transmission with mosquitoes and with ticks. Keep that in the back of your mind. It's just these are the kinds of diseases that they may spread. Next slide. More facts about Aedes mosquitoes. Again, they are the daytime biters. They can breed in any kind of container, large and small, whether they're man-made or tree holes or natural rock pools. They travel up to 600 feet. Keep that in mind. I'm going to bring that up later. I'm talking about community control. So they don't travel all that far in their lifetime. Next slide. Okay, the life cycle of a mosquito. This is the life cycle of a Culex mosquito, but it also applies to the Aedes mosquitoes as well. In the spring, when it gets warm, they become active. I said they're generally, the females have already been mated, so they are going to be looking around to get that blood meal protein for their eggs. So that's when they're going to bite something. Once they get that blood meal and their eggs develop, they will drop them in still water. Again, it can be polluted. It can be, pretty much anything as long as it's still water. Once the eggs are laid, 2 to 3 days, they will go through the getting of 4 larval stages and 1 pupal stage. So that means that of the 7 stages of life, the last being adults, 6 of them are underwater, the biggest part of their life, although not in time-wise, definitely in what is going on. I want you to focus on the right side, the middle picture, larva of a Culex mosquito. These little guys are visible to the naked eye, and you can see them underwater, and they move kind of like, I like to think of them as jumping comets, like if you snap your finger up and down, up and down. That's kind of the way they move, and it's generally right under the surface of the water. If you see those, they're in the one of the larval stages, one of those 4 larval stages. This is important because if you cannot eliminate water where that mosquitoes need to breed, this is the stage where you want to kill them with a larvicide. And I'll give you a lot more information about that coming up. If you go down to the lowest slide on the right, that is a pupae of a mosquito. It's larger, it moves slower, and once it gets to this state, a larvicide will not kill it. Okay, so all this is happening on the water. 7 to 10 days after those eggs are laid, they become adults. So they come out of the water with their wings, they fly off, they look to mate, and start the process all over again. 2 to 3 times in their life, they will reproduce. Important to know, a mosquito can lay upwards of 300 eggs at a time. So if all these mosquitoes are breeding and reproducing, it can be extremely rapid reproduction. Next slide, please. These are some of the places where Culex mosquitoes will breed. Floodwaters, ditches, I already mentioned. Salt marshes, who knew? Yeah, they can be there too. Woodland pools, I'll tell you a lot more about artificial containers down the road. Permanent swamps, water, again, that's still moist edges, great places for mosquitoes to breed. Polluted water, grass tussocks are other places where they can breed. Important about it is that they're temporary bodies of water, seasonal and occasional, pressure polluted, natural or man-made, lacking in predators. That is a big deal. There is nothing here that's going to eat them in 7 to 10 days. Predators don't come that quickly. Mosquitoes know this, and that's why they look for these places to breed. Next slide, please. Okay, these are the kinds of things that most people are going to be concerned about. Common backyard mosquito sources. I'm going to focus on a number of these in the picture. First of all, look at the leaky hose. The leaky hose is a problem. Hey, you're wasting water. Don't have a leaky hose. But if there's a pool of water that forms underneath that hose and sits there for 7 to 10 days, boom, you have got a mosquito habitat. So you want to take care of your leaky hose for more than one reason. To deal with the leakage of the water, and also so it doesn't form have a problem area under there. Ponds can be good or bad, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. Toys. Toys are not just kids' toys. Think of anything that can hold water. anything that can hold water after a rain. And there are many, many things, many objects that you might have in your yard that might be a problem. Neglected pools, huge problem. That's a mosquito habitat. Buckets and barrels, tip those things over, dump them out. Don't let them sit and fill up with water and sit there 7 to 10 days. Fountains and bird baths can be good or bad depending on whether the water is moving. Remember again, mosquitoes do not like moving water. They like still water. That's where they lay their eggs, and that's where the eggs produce the best. Potted plant saucers. You might have something like that on your deck or on your patio or something. If there are little holes that are filled in, that is a great place for a mosquito to lay eggs. Water bowls for pets and wildlife. You know, if you're going to be giving your pets water outside, change that water regularly. Keep it fresh. Same thing with your bird baths. Keep it fresh. I like to think of 4 to 5 days, then dump it and give fresh water. This way the water is clean for your wildlife or your pets, and it's also not creating a mosquito habitat. What I like to show people is at this point, and I can't do it because I can't get a picture of here. Imagine a bottle cap. 300 eggs can go into that bottle cap. And so something as small as that that's catching water in your yard, look for these things. Get rid of them. Make sure they're not holding water. Low areas in your yard, you should be filling those in as best you can. Clogged rain gutters. This time of the year, it's a big problem because we've got the catkins from the oak trees, leaves from the winter. Make sure those rain gutters are clear. You don't want you don't want to harm your home either. So they're and you also don't want to create a mosquito habitat. Open trash bins. A lot of people don't think about this. If you've got a hole in your lid, water can get in. And remember, you only need a bottle cap's worth of water for mosquitoes to lay their eggs. So look inside. Is there water in the bottom of your trash can? If so, dump it out. Make sure your lid fits very well and not upside down. Make sure that it fits tightly. You want to keep out the raccoons and other critters as well. So these are areas that you all want to think about. Next slide, please. We talked about rain gutters, and there are some other things, plant saucers, kiddie pools, obviously, bird baths on the lower left. The one I want you to focus on is the one right dead in the middle. It is a corrugated pipe. Okay, this runs water away from a building. Well, what's wrong with this? It's doing its job, right? The problem is on the very bottom of that, touching the ground. That is an area that can hold a little bit of water, just enough for a mosquito to breed in. So what do? What you do is you drill holes so that last little bit of water can drain out through the bottom. The pipe will still do its job of shooting the water away from a big rain event, but the last little bit will drain out. Now the bottom middle one might be a little bit confusing. What it is a well. What do you do about that? You can't maybe empty the water out of there. And it's too deep to deal with, so what do you do? Well, I'm going to tell you a lot more about that, and it's called a mosquito dunk. Some of you may be familiar with mosquito dunks. Larvicides are what's going to kill mosquitoes in water like this that you cannot empty out. Okay, the picture on the far right is just stupid. You just turn that thing around. Okay, next slide. Mosquito controls. We've already talked about removing sites where mosquitoes breed. Still water. Change the water every few days. 4 to 5 days is a good average. The most successful way to manage mosquito populations where you live is by removing sites where mosquitoes breed. That is hands down the best way to do it. Other things to think about is eliminating or reducing areas where mosquitoes rest. English ivy is a bad one. Mosquitoes like to sit in cool areas that maintain some moisture, and they love English ivy. All the more reason to get rid of it or cut it back. Be aware that this is where mosquitoes might be hanging out, or things like Pachysandra as well. Using screens to keep the mosquitoes out. Yes, out of your homes, that's kind of a no-brainer. But if you've got rain barrels, make sure you have tight fitting screens over your rain barrels, because that's still water. Oh yeah, that can hold some mosquitoes if you're not really careful about it. Okay, the next section we're going to be talking about going forward. Biological controls, predators and BTI. BTI is another name for larvicides, the mosquito dunks, and I'm going to tell you a lot more about this going forward. And then chemicals, I'm going to talk about last for the reason that it should be the last thing you think about when controlling mosquitoes. The most effective controls are directed at immature stages, and those are underwater. Next slide. The biological larval controls include things like mosquito fish. Yes, there is such a thing. If you have a pond, you can buy these and put them in your pond, and they will definitely take care of the mosquitoes. Do not release these to the wild. They are not native here. So do not release them to the wild because they could create an environmental problem. Other things that will come to ponds: dragonfly larvae, frogs, toads, water spiders, ground beetles, midges. These are the kind of things that if you build it, they will come. A good pond situation encourages these creatures to come forward. We've got a little tiny pond in our yard, and right now we don't have any frogs or toads, although we've had them in the past. They kind of come and go, but we do get dragonfly larvae all the time. And I also use BTI, a mosquito dunk in it, and I'm going to tell you more about that going forward. Next slide, please. Okay, the larvicide, the mosquito dunk, the famous mosquito dunk. You can find these all over the place this time of the year. Big box stores, definitely places like Home Depot are going to be carrying them. And generally they carry these things that look like donuts. They come in different formulations, so you can get bits and granules. And what you want to do is flip them over and look at what body of water you should be putting a dunk into. If you've got a little tiny pool, pond, whatever, you may not need something that big. You might get by doing a little baggie of sorts with mosquito bits in it. The important thing is change them regularly. They last a long time, generally around 30 days. I put a note on my calendar when to change my mosquito dunks. And mosquito bits, you look at those and see if you have to change them a little bit more often. But it's easy. It's really easy to take care of mosquito populations when you have ponds and other bodies of water that you can't dump out. If there's a big rain and there's a ditch in front of your house, throw a mosquito dunk in there. If that water is not going to soak into the ground in 7 to 10 days, you don't want to create a mosquito habitat. And if you've got these things, I buy a few packs of them, and you might be good for the whole summer with that. They are safe. They're highly selective for mosquito and certain fly species. Very, very few things other than, mosquito dunks are very, very specific to mosquitoes and these certain fly species. So pets can drink out of the water, wildlife, birds, butterflies, bees, little tiny flies can drink out of water that have been treated with mosquito dunks, and it is safe. It's been around for a long time, proven again and again and again. Now, there are some traps that actually attract mosquitoes. I generally don't advise those. I mean, you can use them, but they need to be monitored more regularly. Mosquito dunks are quick and easy and safe. Go with those. Next, please. Self-protection clothing. You're probably familiar with most of these things. You can see the kind of knitting if you're just going to be hanging out outside. And I know it's not really attractive, but if you're really sensitive to mosquitoes, it'll do the trick. Long sleeves, long pants, socks, shoes, hats, neck covering. All this stuff can protect you. If you're going camping, you might want to get some netting around your camp area to protect yourself. And of course, skin repellents. DEET we're most familiar with, like the off-brand products, but there are others that carry DEET. Picaridin is another chemical that's very common. Deep 25 to 30% solution, you're probably not going to find it any stronger than that. Picaridin, 20%, again, probably in the trade, you're not going to find it higher than that. If you're sensitive to these, you might find oil of eucalyptus, Merck products like Skin So Soft would work too. Lots of stuff. I think people are familiar with repellents, use them. Next one, please. Adult mosquito control. I talk about this last because it, again, should be your last resort. This image of the plane flying over, that is they're treating large areas. In residential areas, it's generally if there is an outbreak of Zika or West Nile virus. And at that point, you have to sacrifice other creatures that are sensitive to these adulticides to save lives, human lives. But most of our, as a matter of fact, all of our jurisdictions in this area are very careful about monitoring, and they do not spray willy-nilly, used as a last resort. Next slide, please. Okay, mosquito adulticides. These are the kinds of things that you're going to see from mosquito spray companies that come to residential yards. Please listen up because this stuff is serious. There are two kinds. There are pyrethroids and organophosphates. The pyrethroids, the most common name you're going to see is permethrin. Permethrin, a mosquito company, the guy who came to our door last night, boy, did I give him an earful, who said, oh, these things are derived, it's all safe, it's all natural, it's from chrysanthemums. That's where permethrin comes from. It's a chemical that is derived from the chrysanthemum flower, and it is deadly. It is deadly to all beneficial insects, your little flies, your pollinators that are flying around. If you're spraying, fogging or spraying, it's the same thing. It's going to kill things that are beneficial, non-target insects besides mosquitoes. If these companies say they're selective for mosquitoes, they are not. They are not. They are not. If they're using these kind of chemicals, it is going to kill all the beneficial insects that are hit. Okay, so here are a couple of other brand names. Organophosphates are even stronger, highly toxic to honeybees, can also be toxic to mammals, and birds, and fish. These lethal pesticides are also known as broad spectrum or non-selective. If you see something like this in a store and you turn it over and you look at the back and the ingredients and stuff, if you see broad spectrum or non-selective, it means it's gonna kill everything it hits, not just mosquitoes. And I say everything, I'm talking about these little bitty insects that are flying around there. I want you to think about a couple of other things too. So a mosquito spray company comes along and they spray the air. Everything that is in that spray, that fog, what have you, is going to die. The droplets are going to fall on the vegetation below, and pollinators and other beneficial insects that visit those plants, even after that truck is long gone, are going to be impacted by that spray. It will simulate, so it has a lingering effect that can be toxic long after the trucks have gone away. Another thing to think about, we know how fast they reproduce. 7 to 10 days, these mosquitoes are reproducing. So this is, they can become immune to some of these treatments. So what do? Just keep making them stronger and stronger? No, you've got to be careful. You want to protect your pollinators. You want to protect your beneficial insects. And you also don't want to kill the predators that would otherwise be wiped out, that are so important to the overall ecosystem. Be really, really careful with that stuff. That is that. Okay, next slide, please. So somebody comes along and they said, well, I understand that you said it on this mosquito talk. Who should I hire? Well, I hope you're going to tell them, first of all, you should get rid of all the water on your property that, that's still water where they can breed, or treat it with a larvicide. If you can't get rid of it, dump it, change it, all that kind of good stuff. And they go, okay, tell me more. I need more information. Okay, if somebody is thinking about hiring somebody, use only a VDAX licensed pest management company. That's the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, Office of Pesticide Services. They take misuse of pesticides very seriously. My guess is that the major companies in this area are probably all VDAX licensed. But you should also be asking them, are you using IPM, Integrated Pest Management? It should not include just the sprays, just the foggers, but they should be talking about getting rid of water that's, still water around the property that we talked about, using larvicides as well. And also the staff should be trained in IPM. They shouldn't just come out there and fog your property. Compare proposals like you do with any good contractor. A special discharge permit is required when you're spraying over water. And again, the office takes pesticide application misuse very seriously. Next slide. These are some of the things they might be considering when you're talking about misuse. Do not apply when pollinators are active. And are pollinators active? Between dawn and dusk. When do mosquito spray companies come? Between dawn and dusk. Huh. Not good, but that's what they do. You shouldn't apply it on food crops. That's a no-brainer right there. On flowering plants that pollinators visit, do these application guys, do they know what all the flowering plants are, especially native flowering plants? Do they know them? Do they avoid them? That's a big question mark. On windy days, don't spray. On the hottest part of the day when you might have a heat inversion or before a rain. Instead of spraying, what you want to do is remove your mosquito-friendly, where they like to hang out. Plants like English ivy or other dense ground covers. Encourage natural predators. How do you do that? Plant native plants. If you plant them, they will come. Birds and other insects will create a wonderful ecosystem in your yard and in your communities. It's very effective, and they also will eat mosquitoes. Remove the standing water, use selective biological larvicides. We know about that. But here's one that a lot of people don't know about, and that is using a fan to move the air. Mosquitoes are weak flyers. Here's a quick story. A few years ago, I gave this talk at a library in North Arlington, and when I was brought into the room where we were going to have the talk, I kid you not, it was filled with mosquitoes. Like, what? So we're walking around, doing the hand clap and everything. It's like, no. We're not going to get rid of them this way. Unless it turned out there was a door to the outside that had been left open, and that's how the mosquitoes got inside overnight. So I asked the person I was working with, do you have any fans? She said, yes. I said, bring me a couple of them. And I set them up at opposite corners of the room, and I put them on circulate. And when I got to this part of the talk, I said, so has anybody been bothered by a mosquito? Any mosquitoes here? And they looked at me like, eh? And I explained to them what had happened, and they were convinced. It really, really works. So if you're having a party or you're having some social activities, people will just think that you're keeping them nice and cool, but you're also keeping the mosquitoes away from them, unless they're like super, super sensitive to mosquitoes. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Next slide, please. Mosquito controls that do not work. Bug zappers. Spraying Listerine or wearing dryer sheets, vapor rub, vanilla, wristbands, ultrasonic devices, clip-on repellents, citronella and other plants, propane-driven CO2 mosquito traps. Bats and purple martins don't prefer mosquitoes, but they do eat them. And it doesn't matter what you eat, garlic doesn't keep them away. Some people swear by their citronella plants or some other things. They say, oh my God, it really keeps the mosquitoes away. And to that I say, yay, you use it. If it works for you, that is great. I'm not going to discount anything that's actually working for you, but these are things that generally do not work. Okay, next slide, please. Remember, the average range of an adult mosquito is between 600 feet and 1 to 2 miles. Work with your neighbors. Look for those places where water might be pooling, and remove breeding or sheltering sites, the English ivy or other places where they like to rest. The most popular spray chemical, permethrin, is non-selective. Full stop. Anybody tells you it's not, that is not true. They're giving you a lie. And if they're telling you all kinds of information about all these products, ask for proof. They will be able to give it to you because it's just not out there. Permethrin can remain in the environment for some period of time as it settles down on the vegetation below where it's been sprayed or fogged, increasing exposure to beneficial insects. Mosquitoes do not like to breed in moving water. So, like, get a little bubbler for your bird bath. There's some great solar ones now. I've got one that's 5 years old and it's going strong. So use these things. It'll keep the water moving. You don't have to worry about changing it as often, but you're still probably going to want to keep it change it just to keep it clean. Okay, next slide. How to avoid adult mosquitoes? Make sure you've got good screens on your houses, and also rain barrels and places like that. You might want to drop a mosquito dunk in a rain barrel just to be safe as well. It doesn't hurt, and it's definitely not going to hurt your plants if you use that water from the rain barrel. Avoid being outside during dawn and dusk, and or wear long sleeves and pants when you're outdoors, and or use an effective repellent on your skin, and fans that are weak flyers. So that is it for the mosquito talk. If anybody's got questions now, I can take them about mosquitoes. And if you think of some more by the end, I could take them as well. But if anybody's got any questions now.
We do have some things in the chat.
Okay.
Have one question. If you dump the water with the little swimming larva in it, will it kill them or will they stay alive?
Yes, they will die.
That will kill them. Okay.
It will kill them if the water stays pooled on the ground when you dump it. Maybe not so quickly, but again, they don't like movement of water. You dump it out, that water soaks in, they are gone. Very effective.
And next question is, do you have a sheet with the toxic killers so that it can be distributed to their neighbors? Or do you know of one that's out there?
What toxic killers? I don't understand. What is that?
It's
you mean like permethrin?
I
Is that what
think
you're
that's
talking
what they
about?
mean. Angela, do you want to clarify your question? Okay, well, that's all I've got from, I'm not sure exactly what she meant. I guess I'm
Okay.
that's what she
Okay,
meant.
I might be able to help you with that.
Oh,
I
she
mean,
did
it's a lot of
specify.
people-
She said what was on the sheet in the lecture. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
I am going to give a whole bunch of information at the very end of this, plus access to the PowerPoint that you're looking at right now. But there's a lot of really great information that will be on specific things about mosquitoes, specific things about ticks, and a group of things. There's a lot of good stuff, and you'll have that at the end of this, and so that should answer the question, I hope.
Great, thank you. And I just want to remind people, you can always do a screenshot too if there's something that immediately you'd like to write down. And then we have one more question.
Sure.
Can you put a mosquito float in a bird bath?
Oh yeah, you can do that. They will break. I think you're probably talking about the mosquito dunk. Yeah, you can do that. They do break down, so that makes a bird bath kind of gunky. I'll tell you what, if you can dump out the water, it's a lot more effective. It keeps the water cleaner. I don't know about your birds, but my birds get real dirty and they jump in the bird bath. And I've got a shallow one and I've got a deeper one. And I just I tip them out and make sure that water is clean. It's better to give them the clean water than to have a mosquito dunk break down. It gets kind of gunky after a while.
Okay,
Okay, is that it?
that's it for now.
Okay, good. And again, if there are other questions later on, fire it up. Okay, next slide, please. Please, we're getting into the ticks. This is kind of some pretty heavy stuff, but there's a lot of changing information about ticks. I learned a lot of new things this year, and unfortunately, with climate change, we do have more ticks in the area, and we want to give you the best and most current information that we have. I'm going to give you identifying information about the most common ticks in this area. You are not going to remember all this from this presentation, but I will give you access to printouts that you can make for yourself with photos and detailed information and some of the pathogens and other things. There's some really good stuff out there with the Virginia Department of Health. You're going to know how to avoid, repel, and remove these ticks. Recognize signs of some basic tick-borne diseases. Care for your pets in your yards. And I'm going to come back to this image a little bit later on. This tick on this little leaf right here. You will know what this tick is and some more interesting facts about it. Next slide, please. So what good are ticks? We said that there were some good things about mosquitoes. Well, ticks are some good things too. They do provide food for reptiles, birds, and small mammals. Our little buddy here, the opossum, is an amazing tick magnet. Not only do they attract ticks, they will clean ticks off of anything. They can eat so many ticks. They're just incredible. They're important to ecosystems too. There have been studies made that the more ticks that are found in an area mean there are more mammals carrying them, so it's probably a pretty healthy ecosystem. Fewer ticks mean too many predators to those animals. Okay, so they're important to studies. They also have a big role in evolution. And unfortunately, historically, animals that are weakened by vector-borne diseases may have weaker offspring or they may die. And others that stay healthy and build up a resistance can pass on better genetic traits to their offspring. So these are important things about ticks. Next slide, please. Tick ID. You're probably not going to remember all this stuff, but if you want to identify a tick, there are 4 basic parts of the tick that you're going to be interested in. Number 1, the overall size. They are itty bitty, even as adults, maybe 1/4 of an inch or thereabouts. So they're very, very small. And if you're getting them in their younger stages, the nymph or the larval stage, they're much, much smaller. So overall size, mouth parts, long, short, narrow, wide, all these are variations. This is an image of an adult tick in that it's got 8 legs. The larval ticks only have 6. I'll tell you more about that later. You don't have to remember all that right now. Scutum, it's like a shield on the back, on the right below their heads on the back. It's also a defining feature. Then finally, festoons. These are these little grooves at the base of their shell on the back. If you've got a really good magnifying glass, you can see all this. Essentials are a magnifying glass, a ruler to measure the size of a particular tick if you're not really sure about the adult size, and comparison pictures. And these are all if you want to identify the tick. Next slide, please. They can really vary in size. Again, when you're looking at the ruler on the right side, you can comparatively larva nymphs, adult males and adult females, really, there's a lot of variation in size. And we are talking about The black-legged tick is the smallest tick we're going to be talking about here. And it is, I mean, an eighth of an inch, maybe a little bit bigger than this. A thing that's important, all of these, larva, nymphs, adult male, adult female, they can all bite. And they can all pass on pathogens. But again, not every bite means that a pathogen is going to be passed on. But all of these can be dangerous to you or your pets or your kids, so you want to be aware. And this whole talk is about being aware and thinking about how you're interacting with your environment and where you might be encountering these creatures. Next slide, please. So here in general, adult ticks may be about the size of a sesame seed, nymphs the size of a poppy seed, and larvae the size of a piece of pepper. So if you see a piece of pepper running across your arm, it's probably not pepper. The interesting thing is that they're on the move. They are not biting you. You can flick them off with your finger. You can push them. They are still little itty bitty guys. Before they attach, you can brush them off. All the important about doing tick checks regularly when you're outdoors. More about this later on. But you can see how small, this again, the smallest tick we're going to talk about, this black-legged tick, which is the deer tick. In comparison to a dime, these are pretty teeny tiny. Next slide, please. Our most common ticks in Northern Virginia, we have 6. Longer term ones that have been here for a longer while: American dog tick, Lone Star tick, brown dog tick, deer tick. The newcomers, the Asian longhorn tick, and the Gulf Coast tick, and I'm going to give you detailed information about each one of these coming up. But these are the guys that we're going to be looking at right here. Many of these ticks are active March through September. We are in tick season right now, people. We are in tick season, and we're getting into some of the time of the greatest pathogen when it's passed on to people. You've got to be really aware during the late spring and summer months. And unfortunately, some adult ticks remain active in the winter. And I'll tell you about these guys too. First one we're going to look at is the American dog tick. Why is it called a dog tick? Well, they like dogs. They prefer dogs. They prefer dogs at various stages, but obviously they will go after other mammals and reptiles too, for that matter. You can see the comparative sizes: larvae, nymphs, adult males, adult females. Again, look at the larva on the upper left, 6 legs, and the others have 8 legs. They grow an extra pair of legs as a nymph, and then the adult males and females. We're going to look at mouth parts. We're going to look at all these various things just to sort of get a sense about the differences in how these ticks are put together. American dog tick has short, stout mouth parts. They have a scutum, that little shield thing behind their heads. They also have festoons, the little grooves at the bases of their bodies. So these are distinctive features. These ticks, the females, are among our larger ticks in the area, up to about 5 millimeters long. So, about a quarter of an inch. So they're, believe it or not, among the bigger ticks. You want to know about dog ticks because they're the ones that might carry Rocky Mountain spotted fever, which is a very deadly virus. Next slide, please. The Lone Star tick is not from Texas. It's known as a Lone Star tick because of this white, or it can be a yellowish marking on the back of the female tick. That is a purely distinctive feature of a Lone Star tick. You notice it does have something of a scutum, the male not so much. The mouth parts are longer and narrower than the dog tick, but they also has the festoon on the base of its body, and they're also among the larger ticks, about 5 millimeters for these guys. They can carry a variety of diseases, including something you might have already heard about, the alpha-gal allergy, or can produce an alpha-gal allergy. This is the red meat allergy. There can be a whole lot of other problems as well that come with it. And they tend to be a lifelong problem with these ticks. So if you develop that, you've probably been bitten by a Lone Star tick. Next slide, please. The brown dog tick, another one of our dog ticks, similar in some respects to the American dog tick with the short mouth parts, but the bodies are a little bit leaner and longer. And they do have the festoons on the base of the bodies like the American dog tick, but not really a very noticeable scutum. They're also fairly large, 5 millimeters long, and they also can carry Rocky Mountain spotted fever. Next slide, please. The next one is a very interesting tick. It's one of the newcomers, the Asian longhorn tick. And it's interesting for a number of reasons. First of all, look at this picture. What is different about this one and all the other pictures we looked at? Well, I'll tell you. We've got a larva, we've got a nymph, and we have an adult female. There are no adult males because no adult males have been identified in the United States. These ticks do not need a male to reproduce. They are self-cloning. Isn't that lovely? The other thing that's interesting about them, they're a little bit smaller. They can be downwards of half the size of the other ticks that we looked at, 3 to 5 millimeters. They, at this point, they're primarily on cattle and sheep, but in Asia, they have passed on pathogens to humans. We aren't bothered so much the humans yet, but we figure it's probably just a matter of time. The other things that are interesting, they have short, stout mouth parts, and they have festoons like the other ticks we've talked about. These are among the ticks that might be active in the winter. Next slide. The Gulf Coast tick is the last of these major ticks that we're going to be talking about. 5 to 6 millimeters, they're about the largest tick that we might encounter. Yes, they did come up from the Gulf Coast. They tend to be closer to the coast than into the interior, but you can come across them if you're going in fields or forests, especially coming up into late May, June, is when they might be more active. Long, narrow mouth parts, they have festoons, they have scutums, but they're among the bigger ones, ticks that are out there. And last but not least, next slide, is the deer tick, the black-legged tick. This is the one most people are concerned about because of Lyme disease. It also can carry other diseases as well, but Lyme is the one that people are most concerned about. The female adult is the most distinctive in color and different size mouth parts between male and female, but the biggest difference in the fact they're teeny tiny to be adults, no festoons. They do not have festoons. The marking around the adult male is not a festoon, it's just a different kind of coloration. So this is the biggest distinctive feature of the ticks in this area, the black-legged tick. And this one, unfortunately, may also be active year-round in the winter. Next slide, please. Let's talk about the tick life cycle. Very different from mosquitoes. First of all, it's all terrestrial. We're not talking about any water here. They start out as an egg mass. The female lays, when I say an egg mass, I mean it's visible to the naked eye, all these eggs. And remember how I talked about upwards of 300 eggs per mosquito clutch? Well, try this. Between 3,000 and 18,000 per clutch. Yes. Now, the ticks in this area don't have the full 18,000, but 3,000? Yeah. So they generally lay one set of eggs in their lifetime. I think that's enough. On their own, they grow from an eggs to larva. Where do they do this? It's in the leaf litter. It's in the vegetative stuff that's on the ground where it's cooler and quieter and shadier and a place where they can grow quietly to become larva or seed tick. 6 legs. Remember I told you about this is where they get their 6 legs. At this point, they need a blood meal to grow to the next level, which is the nymph. And the nymph will grow an extra set of legs. It needs a blood meal to become an adult. And the adult female needs a blood meal for her eggs. And the adult male is going to bite too. So, I mean, it's like everybody's biting here, except for the egg mashers. Unfortunately, here's something I learned this year. The larva, even though they're just growing from an egg to larva, can also carry, there's a possibility of them carrying a pathogen from the mother to be passed on through the eggs. So that's another piece of information that I just learned. Okay, next slide, please. This slide's a good one to give you a sense of the life cycle. While it's the black-legged tick life cycle, it can really apply to the other ticks as well. Go to the dead center of it where you see the symbol for the eggs in the spring. This is where generally the eggs are laid in spring. And they, again, can grow probably to summer to become a larva. You see the bird and the mouse next to it. These are their primary hosts because they only have little, 6 legs. They can't go very far. So the critters that come down to them at their level are the ones that they're likely going to bite, the hosts. And also, maybe somebody who's walking around in the leaf litter with their sandals on or barefoot, that's a possibility too. More about this when we get to tick checks and just being careful about your movement in leaf litter and vegetated areas. Okay, so let's say they got a blood meal. We're looking at the inner circle that grows up to be a nymph in the following spring. And look at all the other creatures that it can bite. They've got 8 legs now, so they can move around a lot more. The risk of human infection is the greatest in the late spring and summer. I've said it before, and I'll probably not say it again. You know. Okay, so you want to be aware. The nymph gets a blood meal from a host, and it will continue to grow to be an adult, let's say sometime in the fall. It can happen sooner if they get blood meals more frequently. It might take upwards of 3 years to complete a life cycle. So they are patient, they can wait. Oh my God, they can wait. They are very, very patient. But also you can see the adults got, they can crawl over everybody and everything. So ticks, that one thing I really want to impress upon you, people are worried about ticks falling from trees. Okay, ticks don't fly, ticks don't jump, ticks don't fall from trees. They run. They run really, really fast. If you've ever seen a tick on a surface going, they can move. They got those 8 legs and they know how to use them. Even with the 6th leg, they know how to use them. They are very, very quick. How do they get aboard? It's a process called questing. They can sit on let's say, a leaf of a shrub or a blade of grass for the longest time, waiting. This is their whole life. They don't eat anything else other than blood and tissue from their host. No other food. 3 years, no other food. So they can hang out and wait. So think about it. If a tick comes aboard, say, on your leg, they are going to be looking for a place that's moist and quiet. So maybe they'll go to the back of your knee. Or if you're in those sandals, maybe between your toes. Or maybe they'll want to climb up to get into your groin area or your belly button. Yes, ticks have been found in all these places. How about maybe you brush your arm against a leaf or a shrub. They could climb on your arm and maybe climb up to your armpit. Or up to your ear or in your hair. That's why people think ticks fall from trees. No, their whole tendency is to move upwards, and they can get into all these body parts by moving, and you generally don't feel them. You're not aware of them. All the importance to check yourself often if you're in vegetative areas or if you're gardening in areas where you're bumping up against these things in the summertime. Next slide, please. I told you I'd come back to this one. This is a female American dog tick. And we know this now because we've heard the description, the sputum, the festoons. Interesting thing about this picture, though, is it's an adult female. How many legs do you count? 6. The other 2 are hanging on to the leaf. They got to hang on with something. But they got all these legs where they can move really, really fast to get on a host, to climb aboard. So this is a really good example of what an itty bitty thing they could sit on, and the fact that they can be patient and move very, very quickly. Next slide, please. So how do ticks spread disease? They do it through the process of feeding. They transmit pathogens by attaching to their host and feeding. They're getting that blood meal. It could take minutes or hours depending on the tick, and if it can find a quiet place to attach and feed. And sometimes it takes days if it hasn't been found. It will get in there and it will get busy. They ingest a pathogen from their previous host and pass it on to the next host. That's how diseases are spread. But again, not every tick carries disease, so not every attachment transmits disease. But this is how it can happen. Next slide, please. So what do? Well, you try to avoid them. I mentioned before, they're most active right now, May, June, July, the time of the most disease transmission. And they're pretty much active into October these days because we do have warmer weather and they will stay active while it's warmer. So what do? You keep your grass and underbrush cut and thinned in your yard. And hang on, gardeners, I'm going to come back in a little bit and talk about this more because I am a big-time gardener and I like to protect the fireflies and other insects that need leaf litter. And I can. You can too. But hang on. Stick with me here. When you're out walking, let's say you're hiking, you want to walk in the center of a trail or a walkway. Don't brush up against weeds, shrubs, and dense vegetation if you can help it, or tall grass where ticks can sit and wait, like I showed you in that last slide. And I say, people, be aware when you're out walking through the neighborhood. There are shrubs that hang over sidewalks. Take a big path so you avoid them, so you're not rubbing up against them. And if you do hit them, do what I do. I do a quick rub in my arm where I touch the leaf. After you've done this a few times, you become aware, and you're not freaked out or anything. It's just your habit is to brush yourself. If a tick came aboard, you're brushing them right off. Wear light-colored clothing. Why? It's all the better to see you, my dear tick. They're dark. Light-colored clothing, they'll show up. Tuck your pants into your socks. So you've got a layer, an extra layer between you and the tick so they can't get to your skin. It might not be a cool look, but neither is Rocky Mountain spotted fever. So keep that in mind. Check kids' pets and ticks for ticks every 4 hours, and yourself too. This is if you're out hiking, you're out working in the yard, you're out playing around in areas, parks, woods, or whatever. Check yourself often and do a good check. Have someone look in your hair, look at your back, and make sure that they're covering all these areas. And here is a big one. Ticks cannot handle heat and dry. Put your clothes in your hot dryer to kill any ticks. And how long do you do it for? 20 minutes on high, 40 minutes on low if you've got more delicate clothing. Put your clothes in the dryer before you wash them. Put them in the dryer first because ticks can survive hot water, but they can't survive hot heat. So dryer, washer, dryer. It sounds goofy, but this gives you absolute protection against ticks. So think about that if you're out and about. Next, please. Then what do? You repel. We talked about repellents with mosquitoes. DEET and picaridin work very well. Oil of eucalyptus and Merck products, not quite so well against ticks to repel them. And there's a newer one. I think probably by next year I'll be able to give you more names, but look for the ingredient newt-ketone. Newt-ketone. It's been approved by EPA, and now there are more products. It's kind of expensive, so that's why it's taken a while to develop them. But they're supposedly, these products are supposedly a lot better to repel ticks than even DEET or picaridin. And it smells like grapefruits. So that's a nice benefit. A little grapefruit behind your ear can't hurt. The other thing you can do is treat your clothes, boots, and shoes with permethrin. What? Permethrin? Didn't I say I was bad? Yes, if you spray it in the air, do not spray it in the air. Do not fog it in the air. You can spray it on your clothes, though, environment area, not all over the place, and your clothes will become deadly to ticks out there. If you don't want to buy pre-treated clothes, there are a lot of clothes that you can buy online that will that already there are a number of brand names out there. Insect Shield is a big one, and these, while if you treat your clothes, well, I'll tell you more about that in an upcoming slide. Hang on, and I'll give you more details. Also, ask your vet for tick controls for your pets. So, first of all, I want to tell you a little bit more about DEET. Toxicity reports are rare, but they do happen, so don't lather yourself in this stuff. Spray lightly, use the lower concentration. Don't use it on babies. Just don't. Don't keep it on the palms of your hands, or if you're using it to rub around, clean your hands off first. You want to clean it off when you're returning indoors, because you don't want to touch your eyes, you don't want to touch wounds, you don't want to get it, because this stuff is strong. If you're out and about, alcohol wipes work really, really good if you can't get back in the house. But soap and water, super. Okay, next slide, please. I told you I'd come back to this. The permethrin treatment for clothes, only for clothes and shoes, not intended for the skin. It kills rather than repels. It is deadly. It really is, but it works well on clothes. If you spray your own clothes, let them dry for at least 2 hours before you wear them. This way, it's going to soak in, it'll dry well, it's not going to be absorbed into your skin once it has dried. If you sweat, no problem, it's still going to be okay. This stuff lasts about 2 weeks, even through laundering, but you can buy the stuff online that will last through many, many, many more launderings, and for years, actually. And I've got a whole set of, well, more than one set, shirt, pants with tight-fitting ankles, and socks that I put over the pant legs. I've got a hat, and I've also got bandanas that you get to put around the neck. The neat thing about this, I don't have to worry about spraying my shoes when I'm wearing permethrin-treated socks, because if a tick gets on inside my shoe, where's it going to go? It's going to die on that sock. This stuff really, really works well. I recommend it highly. And at this point, I want to say about people to think about when they go gardening. I do not go in the garden in vegetated areas, and I have a lot of vegetated areas in my yard. I don't go there this time of the year without wearing my permethrin-treated clothing, because there are ticks all over the place, and you want to be safe. And these clothes are actually fairly comfortable. They're not that hot. They breathe pretty well. I mean, if you're going to be 95-degree heat, yeah, you're going to be boiling, and you probably shouldn't be out there anyway. But you want to be safe, and you don't have to worry about it if you are properly clothes. So I highly recommend permethrin treated clothing. Okay, next slide, please. Landscape treatment for ticks. No, 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 no. Look at this sign. When do you want to get on that grass? Let's see, they got adults, they got children, they got pets. Please keep up. When do you want to get back on there? They're very limited in effectiveness, because if you spray the top layer of leaves, the ticks are underneath that. So what are you going to do? Dig up everything and spray and spray and spray and kill every last little living thing? Please don't spray. They're non-selective. We've been through this. I'm not going to tell you again. You want to remove or isolate brush and provide air circulation to remove humidity, keep your lawns mowed, clean up your leaves. Yes, you can keep leaves for your fireflies and other beneficial insects in certain areas. But in your, say if you've got lawn, areas that you walk around with, keep them cleared of these so you don't have to worry about ticks when you're just wandering through the yards. I have a big leaf pile that we keep a lot of our leaves and we let them, decompose. I also put them on top of my compost pile. I treat them very carefully when I'm moving them around because I know there are ticks in them. But, I have all this stuff, and I have brush piles, great habitat for a lot of creatures. So you can do all, yes, you can do it all. You don't have to worry about having, living in a barren environment. What else do you want to do? You want to have a mulch barrier between your lawns and your wooded or vegetative areas and your patios and play equipment. So these are nice, safe places. Again, ticks don't like hot and dry. They don't want to cross a dry surface to get to a host. They'd rather wait on the vegetation, on the leaf, for somebody to come to them. They don't want to have to go and get it that way. They're not tree climbers either. Their hosts are too far away up that tree. So they're not going to worry about that. They're going to wait for somebody to come to them. I also include this thing, it's kind of like good luck, exclude wild animals, deers, they come in on mice, they come in on birds, they will come in on other things. So they will be around. Don't feel that if you have a big deer fence, you're safe from ticks. It might help for the deer ticks, but there are other ticks out there as well. Next slide, please. So you got a tick. Oh my God, what do you do? Well, in the old days, you might have panicked, but now you know that you want to get a pair of narrow-tipped tweezers. But first, you're going to be searching head to toe at least daily. But if you're, hiking and doing something more often to make sure these ticks are not going to attach. If you find one, line it up very carefully. Once you got it around the mouth parts, squeeze as tight as you can and then pull up steadily to get it off. That's the way you do it. You don't want to touch it with your bare hands. You don't want to crush it. You don't want to put alcohol on it. You don't want to put fire on it. Why not? For the same reason that you squeeze those mouth parts very tightly, you do not want that tick to spit a pathogen back into you. You don't want to shock it so it spits back into you. Whether or not it's carrying a pathogen, you do not want tick spit back inside your body. So this is why tweezers are the only way to go. Best to remove them within 24 hours or a lot sooner if you can. Tick checks are very, very important. At this point, I generally like to show people my tick kit, but let me describe it to you. I've got everything I need in a little snack bag. These little snack packs that you can get, Ziploc snack pack. Everything can fit in there. What do I have in there? I have got a pair of really good tweezers with a very narrow tip on them, and that's to remove the ticks. I have alcohol prep pads. You can get a bunch of these at the drugstore. Make sure they're moist though, they do dry out. These are great because you can use it to clean yourself up also to wrap a dead tick in it to kill it, or if you want to identify it. I'll tell you more about this later on. But you want to have a bunch of these little pads, and you can fit this all inside of a snack bag. Another thing you want to have is a ruler, so you can, measure the size of the tick. We talked about how long they are. And if you can, I love loupes, L-O-U-P-E. People are familiar with loupes. They are wonderful. These little tiny magnifying glasses, which I found out about when studying plants when I was taking my Master Naturalist training. Wonderful. They've got really good magnifying. So you can see, what size tick it is, probably figure out what is it larva, is it nymph? Wonderful. And they're small. They will fit inside of a snack bag. And that's all your equipment. The other thing, a couple of extra snack bags to go inside your snack bags. Why? If you do find a tick and you want to have it ID'd, you can put it inside, zip it up in this bag, and you don't have to worry about it. It's got it wrapped in alcohol, prep bag, prep pad. It will be dead, and you're all safe with that. And I'll tell you more about getting it identified later on. Next slide, please. Then what? After removing the tick, you want to thoroughly clean the bite area with rubbing alcohol, an iodine scrub, or soap and water. If you're home, soap and water is great. If you're out and about, these little alcohol prep pads, wipe it down really well. Want to clean off the area, get rid of all that tick spit. And then you either submerge the live tick in alcohol, place it in a sealed bag, like I told you about, or a container, wrap it tightly in tape if you have it, or flush it down the toilet. Do not crush it with your fingers. Do not take a chance that you're going to get a pathogen. Then, if you want to have it ID'd, on the last slide of this presentation, I will tell you where you can take it. But you can also use the Tick ID app, and I will have some information about that too. And you want to, if you're going to take it to a Virginia Cooperative Extension office, you want to put it in a Ziploc bag with rubbing alcohol so it's dead. And contact information, date, location where the tick attached, and approximate length of attachment. This is also important if you are going to talk to a doctor, if you think you might have picked up a pathogen from a tick. Then if you develop a rash or fever or unusual symptoms within several weeks of removing a tick, go to your doctor. Most doctors can test for a whole panel of possible pathogens, but if they're not really sure, they might send you to an infectious disease specialist. Follow their advice. You don't want to screw around with this. Quick story. Got a nephew, wonderful kid, was in high school, and suddenly his personality changed. He became a recluse, and this is a very outgoing kid, that he became a recluse. He put on a lot of weight. He would not leave the house. He was a mess, and he knew he was a mess. They finally ran a bunch of panels for tick-borne diseases, and one of them came back positive. And even before he got treatment started, he was so relieved. He said, I knew there was something going on. Well, he's probably going to be on antibiotics for the rest of his life, but he's back to normal. He's outgoing. He's in college now. He's like 6'6", amazing kid, and back to his old personality. So it can affect you more than just having a fever or some other aches and pains. It can actually change your personality. Okay, next slide, please. Basic information. Tick-borne diseases are the most common vector-borne illnesses in the U.S. Yes. Where are they? Wherever ticks are found. Where are ticks found? Everywhere. The populations are the greatest in the Northeast, Midwest, and Pacific states, but we know they're everywhere. We know that they're here too. Next slide. This slide and the next one is a picture of information that I'm going to give you links for so you can look it up yourself. You probably want to have this stuff handy or know where you can get your hands on it. the illnesses that you might be able to get from a tick, the species that might carry this pathogen, the stages of life that it might pass it on, and the minimum length of time of attachment before a pathogen can be spread. You can see, especially in this far right column, there's a lot of unknowns. So these are all the kinds of things, if you're starting to feel really lousy, you can ask your doctor about. I mean, it's good to have a copy of this thing, take it to them and say, can you test me for everything from soup to nuts on this thing to make sure that I'm not carrying a tick-borne disease. This slide, the next slide, please. The next slide is the times of the year when tick stages in Virginia are active. If you look in the very center of this, between April and September, you see everybody's busy at some stage, whether they're a larva, a nymph, or an adult. They're all busy at this time. So there are a lot of ticks out there right now. And also you can see the black-legged tick and the Asian longhorn tick are pretty much active in winter months as well. So this is another thing that's going to be available to you. I'll tell you about from the Virginia Department of Health, a really good chart to keep for yourself. Next slide, please. I'm going to talk about two diseases only, the two of them that concern people primarily, Lyme disease and Rocky Mountain spotted fever. Lyme disease is transmitted by the Ixodes species, which is in our area the deer tick, the black-legged tick. It usually has an oblong rash, bullseye rash that comes with it. 70% of the people who are bitten by a disease-carrying tick will develop this, which means that 30% of the people do not get this symptom. So just because you don't have an oblong rash doesn't mean you haven't, you don't have Lyme disease. So just keep that in your mind. It can occur with attachment of 24 hours plus, but that's a real variable. So all the more important to check for ticks frequently. Later, you will get flu-like symptoms, nausea, headache, fever, general stiffness of the neck joints. That's an interesting one, so keep that in mind. Chronic symptoms can really affect a number of untreated people, but antibiotics can really knock it out for most folks, especially if it's caught early. Next slide. Here are what some of the bullseye rashes look like. Again, 70% of the people might get this. That means 30% of the people might not. So that's Lyme disease. Rocky Mountain spotted fever. This is the one that's transmitted by the dog ticks, the American dog tick, the brown dog tick. It requires attachment of 4 to 6 hours, not very long. That's why you want to check yourself, your pets, your kids, anybody who's out there frequently. Day 2 to 12 after a bite, you get your first symptoms, which are usually the classic flu symptoms: headache, chills, fever, muscle ache, nausea, vomiting. Day 3 plus is when you develop the classic rash, wrists and ankles, and a blood test is needed to confirm. But once the symptoms develop, if you're not treated, people can die within 2 weeks. Next slide. This is what Rocky Mountain spotted fever rashes look like in the early and later stages. So it's a pretty distinctive rash. If you've gotten that, you get to a doctor. And speaking of which, we are not doctors, neither are Virginia Cooperative Extension staff. You want to get to somebody who knows how to test for these things or can send you to someone who will. Again, if you are feeling lousy, get tested. But if it comes back negative and you still feel lousy, get tested again. And if it comes back negative and you still feel lousy and you can't explain all this stuff, get tested again. Sometimes it takes multiple tests before you get a positive result. It might take a while before it actually works through the system and comes up positive. Don't give up. Keep getting tested. doctors should understand this. Next slide, please. Pets can get tick-borne diseases too. I love this slide because it really gives you a good idea about the places where you should be checking your pet, and some of the same places that we're looking on humans. Well, maybe around, not around the eyelids, but folds around the eyes, in and around the ears, between the toes, at the elbows, in and around the groin area, and of course, under the tail, and of course in the fur. Look for them there too. There are collar sprays and powders that they can have, but these are repellents. They're not absolutes. You're not going to be dipping your dog in permethrin. And so you do repellents, but you should still do tick checks. Always ask your vet. Don't be treating them on your own. The vet knows what's best for your particular animal. They can also live on a pet's and humans' bedding indoors. So you want to look for ticks when you're cleaning the bedding. And again, you can put it in a hot dryer. That means the bedding and not the pet. Put it for 20 minutes to kill the ticks. That works very well as well. Oh, and this is something else to keep in mind. If you're out hiking or you're out with your dog out and about, before you get in the car, do a pretty quick tick check, because you don't want to be bringing those damn ticks in your vehicle. And not a happy thing if there's a tick running around. That said, if it gets blisteringly hot in your car when you're not using it, it's probably going to kill the tick, but better to leave them outside. Okay, next slide, please. In summary, how do you prevent ticks? Avoid contact with grasses, leaves, shrubs where ticks wait. Use repellent, wear appropriate clothing. Check for and remove ticks. Use a hot dryer for clothes. It works really, really well. Pets, use an appropriate repellent. Talk to your vet first. Check your pets after they've been outside. The bedding, put in the hot dryer in the yard. Deal with your brush. Keep it apart from the areas where you're going to be moving around mostly. Clean up your leaf litter or isolate it from areas where you're moving around for the most part. Install a barrier or some kind of hardscaping. It could be rocks. It could be, a stone thing. It could be, any kind of hardscaping between wooded areas and lawns, patios, and play areas. If you're sitting on your deck and you're having your glass of wine, you're not going to have to worry about a tick climbing up and getting, in. Don't worry about it there. They don't like dry spaces. Again, they prefer if you come to them, not to go to you. Discourage wildlife the best that you can, although remember, birds and little rodents can go anywhere. Next slide, please. Okay, I said I was going to give you information. I was not lying. CDC has some of the best information on vector-borne diseases, really thorough. You're going to see some of the same images that you saw on this presentation. Virginia Department of Health mosquito and tick disease information. The second link there, the one that is 12/2019-08, that is the one that has the 4-pager that has ID information for most of the ticks I talked about here, as well as the 2 charts with the diseases and when the times of the year that ticks are active. That is a good one to copy and keep or have handy so you can look at it. Virginia Cooperative Extension's got some great information about mosquitoes. And don't forget about VDAC, Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. If there are characters going around and spreading bad information about mosquito sprays or engaging in bad practices, all good stuff. Last slide. If you want to have a tick ID'd in our area, the closest one, Fairlington Community Center for Alexandria at Arlington. The address here is on Stafford Street. And the email is for the Master Gardeners, Master Gardener of Arlington, Alexandria, gmail.com. Call them before you bring a tick over to make sure that there's somebody there that can identify that tick. They've got some amazing microscopes. I've seen incredible things, bugs and things. Really good stuff, but you want to have somebody there who can take a good look and be able to identify it. Again, They cannot tell you about pathogens. You will have to go online to find a place. If you want to have it ID'd for a pathogen, there are places where you can do that. But they can definitely tell you what stage a tick is and what kind of tick it is. If you want a copy of this PowerPoint, this whole thing that I just told you, what you just saw, remember armn.org, ARMN.org. That's really all you need to know, because once you get there, you'll see, oh, learn about, ticks and mosquitoes. This is here, this is available, as well as additional information about mosquitoes and ticks, some more compressed things that might be a little bit easier for you to carry around. And that's all I got on ticks and mosquitoes. So are there any more questions? Are you there?
I'm looking
Hello?
at the chat. Yep. I'm going to stop sharing. And so I can
Okay.
see the chat better.
Okay.
So somebody said, let's see, can you get rid of ticks just by taking a shower after you've been outside?
Actually, that is a really a good piece of information. Definitely in the same vein as being able to knock it off, if they have not attached, yes, that's a great idea. Take a shower. Again, it's not going to deal with your clothing. So while you're taking a shower, make sure your clothes are in the dryer. But yeah, taking a shower is a great idea. Still do a tick check after that to make sure somebody has not attached.
Okay, and what are tick predators?
Well, tick predators are the ones that that eat them. Those are the primary predators. But other than that, I don't know that there's anything beyond that. That's kind of it, as far as I know.
I think we were just like wondering what eats them.
Oh, okay. I went over some of them, but I guess I kind of did it quickly. There are reptiles, birds, small animals. Remember, I have the little picture of the possum. They are tick vacuums. They're incredible. They're great tick predators. Also, there are some parasites like nematodes and tick wasps that will also devour ticks. Or they can, with wasps, they can, do the nasty thing where they can plant their eggs inside of them and nasty stuff that way. But that's pretty much the critters that will go after ticks.
Thank you. And here's another question. Actually, this is more of a statement. Using liquid fence to repel deer has greatly reduced ticks in my yard.
Using liquid fence. Sure, I use it too to keep the deer out. I think that's a fine idea. I'm a big fan. And actually, just as a little hint, rotate the different kinds of deer repellents that you use, because they can become used to a certain one and they're just going to chomp right through it. So if you rotate a few of the different kind of tastes and smells, it's a good idea. But yeah, I think deer fence is a great idea. If it works for you, it's not going to keep out all wildlife, but yeah, you want to keep the deer out. Sure.
And those are the last of the questions that we have in the chat. Does anybody else have any questions?
This is Glenda. I want to thank Kasha for a very informative presentation, and I want to thank everybody for participating. And I think we have to both appreciate and be wary of these insects. So, does anyone have anything else? I think we need to wind this up shortly. Deborah, you have anything else?
I think that's it. Thank you so much.
Okay, yeah, thank you,
Thank you,
Deborah.
everybody.
Thank you, Kasha. Thank you,
Thank-
everybody,
thank
for
you all.
participating. And this Saturday, we need volunteers to help plant, and check our website for other opportunities. So, good night.
Okay, thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.